Hello, I'm Mariana Newman, and I am a public historian who specializes in property preservation here in New Orleans. Originally, my idea for this assignment was to take a tour of the adjudicated and blighted properties that I am helping bring back into commerce through public history initiatives. But unfortunately, the night that I was supposed to submit that assignment, my computer, I guess being of historic preservation itself, died and I lost all of my work. And as a public historian that actually practices, I was very disappointed, and I decided to take a walk outside. You see, I live at the American Can Company, which is this big multi-building that's red and white that used to be a tin can factory that opened in 1906. And I chose this building out of all of the buildings that I could have rented an apartment because of its historic background. And when I took my walk trying to release steam after losing my previous assignment, I realized that I am living in historic preservation. So, join me as I take you behind the scenes of the American Can Company and its historic journey. According to the Landmark Report, dated January 13th, 1998, to nominate the American Can Company for the National Historic Landmark Registry, the American Can Building represents possibly the only catalog of progressive factory architecture on one site in the city. Alterations consist mainly of small additions and severe damage to the 1906 section of the facility and to the train shed in a December 1989 fire. The present buildings are centered around an early railroad spur which switches off the main line and enters the complex at an angle. It was from this spur that tin was unloaded for use in the factory. Originally, the trains were unloaded and loaded on the Orleans Avenue side of the three original Toulouse Street buildings. And as new buildings were added, each was constructed to front between the buildings was formed into a train shed, which was covered by a 1920 skylighted roof structure, similar to that of passenger train stations.
The fifth level.
It has two rows of columns, a steel truss roof, and a ventilating monitor along each side. Unfortunately, roughly half of this was lost in the fire. You see, in December of 1989, there was a horrific fire that caused significant damage to the original buildings built in 1906 and the train shed. Although this fire was horrible when we discuss historic preservation, it did ignite a new sense of what can we turn this building into. And after 13 years, at the beginning of the 21st century, the American Can found a new purpose.
These are the same windows that have been here for almost 100 years.
manufacture a full line of cans. As the factory proved successful, this list grew to include containers for meats, beer, carbonated beverages, salad oils, paints, and mortar oil. According to a press release, on the company's 50th birthday, it began with only 46 employees in 1901 and produced 10 million cans in its first year. On June 24, 1917, the factory was described as the largest can maker in the South and one of the largest in a vast system with factories throughout the United States, Canada, and Hawaii. By that day, the workforce had expanded from the original 46 employees to over 500. From an annual output of 10 million cases of cans in 1906, the plant was now shipping that many alone to the adjoining state of Mississippi, and in addition, was supplying 23 million cans annually to Texas, 20 million cans annually to Louisiana, and an unspecified but large number to Western Alabama as well. The American Can Company's growth was also obvious from the expansion the facility experienced. On the eve of World War I, the facility had about 158,000 square feet. By the end of the 1920s, it had about 484,000 square feet. Due to the size and longevity of this particular industrial entity, one must also consider the important fact: how has this building affected the New Orleans economy? Employees here manufactured cans and packaging for just over 80 years. But when the factory was closed in May of 1988, it had employed over 1,500 workers. But it ultimately fell victim to changing economic times with the regionalization of manufacturing and the closing of 4 major breweries in the area. The manufacturing operations were relocated to other parts of the country when the plant was closed, and it remained vacant till the 21st century. So as we take a tour, and you see the different halls and the different pictures and the restored wood that was originally here, I'm going to take you into my apartment so you can see the high ceilings and the pipes and just the real industrial look that tops off every step that you make in this building. Is literally a part of history. You see, the lofts are either 1, 2, or 3 bedroom units, and they range from 1,000 to 1,450 square feet. Originally, it was for low-income units, but as of 2016, that program is no longer, and the American Can Company has went through 2 different management companies. However, it has remained a staple of the mid-city neighborhood. So there you have it. Just a brief history of how historic preservation of properties and buildings can be right under your nose or your home. And I learned in the module on preservation that New Orleans and Charleston were the first 2 American cities to develop this historic building landmark process. And when looking at a building like the American Can, even though there are other American Can Company factory buildings that are used today as multi-purpose, and they all resemble the red and white moniker, The one in Mid-City was one of the first to do so. And it makes me proud as a public historian, but also as a native New Orleans to know that the preservation of property is at the forefront of the city's culture, the city's economy, the city's social status. So, thank you for going along this tour with me. And if you have any questions about the American Can Company or historic preservation in New Orleans, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.